With news that a vaccine might be around the corner, new ethical questions are on the horizon. Who will get it first? How much will it cost? Will the rich or poor be first in line? Or the most vulnerable, like this woman here. She's living in a bomb shelter because of the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict. And COVID is running rampant in these tight quarters. Or should doses go to frontline workers who put their lives on the line, like here at a testing station in Frankfurt? Questions remain, especially on the news that Brazil has suspended its trial of a Chinese candidate vaccine. There are no easy answers. Welcome to the show. All this week we're talking vaccines and COVID-19. On Monday, news broke that there could be a vaccine by the end of the year. America's Pfizer and Germany's BioNTech were first to announce successful data from a large-scale clinical trial of a coronavirus vaccine. They say it's more than 90% effective. But we're not going to be able to rely on just one vaccine to inoculate the world. And then came the unfortunate news: Brazil's health regulator has stopped clinical trials of China's CoronaVac. Organisers of the trial say there was a death, but that it was not related to the vaccine. Let's touch on those developments with Henry Rutgers, Professor of Bioethics near IR. If that were the result, that the death were linked to the trial, how ethical would that make it?
The ethics of a trial doesn't depend on whether something bad happened in the trial. In trials, there is risks, just like in clinical care. The trials should work to minimize those risks in advance. And if everything was done to keep that risk minimal, that wouldn't necessarily indicate any ethical problem in the design of the trial.
But are participants here being exploited?
I don't think so. They are being offered a deal that is perfectly reasonable to take. They are recruiting in areas of high transmission of COVID, a very dangerous disease that can kill and is killing many people in those areas. They are taking risks because, unlike the people who will use this vaccine after it's being proved safe in these large populations, this is still experimental. They are still checking on the safety. They're still checking on the efficacy. Mm-hmm. But it's a gamble, if you will, that is reasonable to take and therefore a very fair offer, I think, to the trial participants.
We mentioned one corona vaccine being very successful, one less successful. There are hundreds in development right now, but what is the most ethical way of testing a more promising one and a less promising one?
You know, we don't know that which vaccine is successful at this time. It's a bit like calling the elections after half an hour of results pouring in. Things still will change. But still, when there are signals that one vaccine might be more promising than another, it may be tempting to say, oh, it's not okay to compare them anymore to each other because we're offering the people who are getting that, at that point, less promising vaccine, a less promising alternative. But remember, it's really like the elections. It is very hasty.
Just briefly, why is it important to test vaccines on the continent or country in which they're to be used?
Well, it's actually very important for that country and its populations. Not only is it fair towards the participants and their families who get potentially protected by the vaccine if it works, it's also important for the inhabitants of that country to know this vaccine was tested in people like us who have our nutritional and environmental and maybe even genetic characteristics. And it will also help that country, I think, in the negotiations later about which country will be getting the vaccine if it's proven efficacious. So it's actually very valuable for a country to be a test site for vaccine trials.
Okay, Neil, stay where you are. We'll return to you later in the show. First of all, BioNTech and Pfizer have sparked a surge of optimism. But the unsung heroes of this tale are the thousands of unpaid volunteers taking part in clinical trials, many in Latin America. However, it's not clear when Latin Americans will actually get the vaccine.
In Sao Paulo, BioNTech researchers have already tested the vaccine on hundreds of people, either with an active ingredient or placebo. Latin America is one of the world's main vaccine testing grounds, largely in Brazil. Volunteers are not allowed to talk to the media. They're unpaid. For many, the attraction is that they will at least be vaccinated by taking part. Our test subjects are not just health workers. They're also ordinary Brazilians who have to get up early to take the bus or subway for hours to get to work. Brazil is the country with the second most coronavirus-related deaths in the world. Do the people here feel like guinea pigs in a lab? Of course there's a risk. That's unavoidable when testing the vaccine. Monday's announcement showed that BioNTech's research was more advanced than any of its competitors' vaccines. The German company stressed the test results were early and still incomplete. We believe that this vaccine from Mainz will be efficient. It will probably be one of the most important vaccines in the world. Another German pharmaceutical company, CureVac, is also testing a vaccine in Latin America. In Panama, the high infection rate among the population makes it easier to get speedy results. The Panamanians are hopeful that the cooperation will allow them to manufacture the vaccine itself later. Technology transfer in return for helping with the testing phase. The fact that Panama is working together with the German vaccine company certainly gives our country a competitive advantage over other countries. CureVac is also testing in Peru. For the inhabitants of the poor area Bella Vista del Mirador, the testing process itself is not the main issue. For them, it's simply about surviving the pandemic. The people here fear they will once again be left behind when it's time for the vaccine to be given out. I doubt the Peruvian government will provide us with the vaccine here. It's almost impossible. We feel forgotten. The now very real prospect of a vaccine this year is largely due to the contribution of people like the residents of Bella Vista del Mirador. But when Latin America will get the vaccine remains unclear.
Well, something else that could speed up the process of finding a successful vaccine are human challenge trials. Here's Derek Williams on that.
Will other countries do their own challenge trials now that the UK has announced it's doing so?
Challenge trials involve intentionally infecting organisms with a pathogen to find out how well vaccines or medications work at stopping that pathogen. They're a fast-track method for determining safety and efficacy, and we conduct them all the time, usually on animals, especially primates. But in ethical terms, human challenge studies, like the one proposed in Britain, can be pretty charged. If the plans are approved, starting this January, researchers there will begin deliberately infecting young, healthy volunteers with SARS-CoV-2, initially to find out how much of the pathogen it takes to make them infected. Once the scientists have determined that, they can begin giving other volunteers vaccines, then subsequently challenging their immune system with that preset dose of coronavirus to see how effective the vaccines are. Doing things this way can provide precise data quickly, so it can really speed up the development process. That's because instead of just giving a late-stage vaccine candidate to thousands of volunteers and a placebo to thousands of others, and then basically waiting to see what happens, researchers have a lot more control over the entire process. But they don't have control in one key area. Because we still don't have surefire therapies to treat someone if an induced COVID-19 infection turns severe, the possibility that a human challenge trial could cause a volunteer long-term damage or even kill them, that can't be ruled out. Despite those risks, Britain is apparently not the only country to consider conducting human challenge trials. According to the science journal Nature, at least some exploratory planning has commenced in Belgium and the US as well.
And returning to our professor of bioethics, Nir Ayal, what's your take on human challenge trials?
I think that challenge trials, quite distinct from what we've discussed so far, which are regular field trials. Challenge trials are also, in my view, ethical. That's a less consensus view than the one that I've expressed earlier, challenge trials would be acceptable in my own view because the risks, although they exist, remain lower for mortality than a practice that everybody accepts, such as live kidney donation. Only in this case, we're doing it not just to help one person, of course, with the informed consent of the person being put at risk, but to help hundreds and thousands and millions of people if we can get to a vaccine faster. I think it's on balance justified with the informed consent of the volunteers.
In what ways can they help speed up the development of a vaccine?
In multiple ways. In a field trial, you're waiting for people to get exposed to the virus, and that sometimes doesn't happen. It has not happened in some of the early trials for a vaccine to fight coronavirus in the UK. It hasn't happened in the trials of other types for coronavirus countermeasures in China. So if there wouldn't be enough exposure to the virus in a regular trial, we wouldn't know for many, many months whether the vaccine protects against the virus or not. In a child trial, you simply deliberately infect people. The flip side of this is that you know that they were exposed to the virus, and you can find within weeks the results. There are also other things that you can find out. You know exactly when you infected them, so you can assess very accurately the duration of the vaccine protection. You can assess very accurately the exact mechanism through which the immune system protects those in whom the vaccine worked. So it's very, very valuable for vaccine development.
Bioethics Professor Nia Ayal, thanks for being on the show today.